Welcome back with a smiling face. Important note before starting, if you are a fan of audio stories, then our Patreon account is the best platform for you. Join us on Patreon for the best audiobooks ever. The Time of Awakening. Episode 2. Chapter 11 to 18. A blur spell turned out to be like something you see in sci-fi movies, where the villain all but disappears, camouflaged behind a magical force field. As an effect, it's easily done. Apparently, it's just as easy in real life, if you're a witch. Tori's mom walked right beside me, nearly invisible. With no chance to take off, I had to play my role, searching for the rendezvous spot, which gave me the excuse to look for an escape opportunity. Maybe a hole in the wall too small for Tori's mom to follow me through, or a precarious stack of boxes I could topple onto her head, or an abandoned hammer I could brain her with. I'd never brained anyone in my life, but with Tori's mom, I was willing to try. From the front road, the place looked like a regular factory with a few outbuildings. Once you got back here, though, there were buildings everywhere, a lot of them not even being used. Prime real estate. Or it would be, without the smog-spouting factory to bring down the neighborhood. Those spewing stacks were the only sign the factory was operational. Probably running well below capacity, barely hanging on, like a lot of industry in Buffalo. I had no idea what they made. Metal stuff, it looked like, from the stock in the warehouses. Once, when we were darting between buildings, we had to duck behind some barrels as a trucker drove through the lot, but that was the only employee we saw. The third building we checked was open, so Tori's mom didn't need to cast a spell to unlock it. As we stepped in, I thought, this looks promising. The last two had been filled with equipment and rolls of metal. This one seemed unused, and was scattered with crates. They weren't stacked precariously, but there was a whole warehouse to search. As we moved in deeper, I saw what looked like an off-balance stack. Near it was a pile of small metal pipes, the perfect size for braining someone. I headed toward the pipes, my gaze on the ground, as if searching for my torn shirt. "I think we can stop this charade now, Chloe," Tori's mom said. I turned slowly, taking a moment to plaster on my best wide-eyed look. "There's no shirt here," she said, "or rendezvous point. Perhaps there is, somewhere in this complex, but not here. Let's try the next." She caught my arm as I walked past. "We all know you're trying to escape again. Marcel only hopes the real rendezvous point is nearby and that you're laying a trail right now, one that will entice Derek back to investigate once he thinks we're gone." "Laying a trail? Oh, no. Why hadn't I thought of that? I didn't need to be here to get Derek's attention. If he smelled that I'd been near the factory. I am not trying to escape. I want to help Simon. We need to find. The boys don't interest me. You do." "Me?" Her grip on my arm tightened. All those kids had been at Lyle House for months, behaving themselves, working so hard to get better. Then you arrive and suddenly we have a full-scale mutiny on our hands. Within a week, 4 residents are on the run. Quite the little instigator, aren't you? I'd been the catalyst, not the instigator. But it wouldn't win me any brownie points to correct her. She continued. "You took action while the rest swallowed our lies and prayed for rescue. My daughter didn't even have the guts to join you. Because you crushed any fight left in her? Because you made her think she had to play perfect patient to please you? The fates played us a nasty twist, Chloe Saunders. They stuck you with dear Aunt Lauren, always fretting and wringing her hands. A perfect match for my spineless daughter. But where fate wrongs us, free will can make things right. I think you and I can reach an agreement that will benefit us both. She released my arm. Dr. Gill tells me you contacted spirits from Lyle's early experiments. I said nothing, my gaze steady. I know she confronted you, Tori's mom continued. Something of a fanatic, our Dr. Gill, as I'm sure you noticed. She's obsessed with Lyle's secrets. Ambition is healthy. Obsession is not. She eyed me. So what did these spirits tell you? Nothing. I'd accidentally raised them from the dead, so they weren't too interested in chatting with me. She laughed. I suppose not. But for you, at your age, to raise the dead. Her eyes glittered. Remarkable. Okay, that was dumb. I just confirmed I'd raised the dead. A lesson in playing it cool, don't. Could you contact them again? She asked. I could try. Resourceful and reasonable. That's a combination that will take you far. Here's what we'll do, then. I'll tell Dr. Davidoff we found the spot here. The shirt was gone, likely taken by the boys. But they left this. She pulled a page from her pocket. It was from Simon's sketch pad, carefully torn out. On one side was a partial drawing, clearly Simon's work. On the other side, she'd written in block letters, BSC Cafe 2 p.m. Meet at the Buffalo State Cafeteria at 2, I said. The page is too clean, though. They'll know it wasn't left here. I took it, walked over by the metal pipe, crouched, and brushed the note across the dirty floor. Then I paused, still hunched over, and looked up at her. What about the insulin? I'm sure those boys have already found some. Can we leave it here, just in case? She hesitated. She didn't want to bother, but if it would win my trust. I'll get the vials from Lauren later and bring them back, she said. Now, though, we need to report that note. She turned to leave. I wrapped my fingers around a metal pipe, then sprang up, swinging it at the back of her head. She spun, fingers flicking. I sailed backward into a stack of boxes, the pipe flying from my hands and clanging to the floor. I scrambled for it, but she was faster, snatching it up and brandishing it. Her mouth opened, but before she could get out a word, a crate shot from the stack over my head. She sidestepped as it whizzed past. Behind it stood Liz. I lunged for the pile of pipes, but Mrs. Enright hit me with another spell. My feet sailed out, my outstretched hands hitting the floor, pain blasting through my injured arm. As I looked around, I caught a glimpse of Liz's nightshirt behind the stacks of crates. Elizabeth Delaney, I presume. Mrs. Enright moved back against a wall, her gaze flitting from side to side, ready for the next flying object. So it seems, in death, you've finally mastered your powers. If only it had been sooner. Such a waste. Liz froze between stacks, her face stricken as Mrs. Enright confirmed her death. Then she squared her shoulders and, eyes narrowing, fixed them on a stack of crates. Even in death, you can be useful, Elizabeth, Mrs. Enright said. A poltergeist is a rare find, one that will help Dr. Davidoff overcome his disappointment at losing dear Simon and Derek. The crates shuddered and cracked as Liz pushed, tendons popping with the strain. I frantically motioned for her to concentrate on just the top one. She nodded and pushed it, but Mrs. Enright simply stepped out of range. Enough of that, Elizabeth, she said calmly as the crates crashed behind her. Liz grabbed a loose board and hurled it at her. I said, enough. She hit me with another spell, this one a jolt of electricity that left me on the floor, gasping and shaking. Liz crouched over me. I whispered I was okay and pushed up until I was sitting. My whole body throbbed. Mrs. Enright looked around, unable to see Liz unless she was moving something. I can't hurt you, Elizabeth, but I can hurt Chloe. If so much as a scrap of wood flies, I'll hit her with another energy bolt. Is that clear? I struggled to my feet, then raced for the door. I made it 5 feet before I froze. Literally. It's called a binding spell, Mrs. Enright said. Very useful. Now, Elizabeth, you are going to behave while Chloe and I. The spell broke. I stumbled, twisting to regain my balance, and looked up to see her frozen instead. A dark figure stepped from the shadows. A binding spell. Tori strolled over. Is that what you call it, Mom? You're right. It is useful. She walked in front of her mother's still form. So I'm a disappointment, am I? Chloe is the daughter you wish you'd had? You know, I'd be really hurt by that, if I thought you actually knew her. Or me. She stepped closer. Shopping, Mom? I'm locked in a cell, my life is falling apart, and you really believed I wanted to go shopping? You don't know me any better than she does. She waved at me. You. Tori staggered back with a gasp as her mother broke free and hit her with a spell. You've got a lot of learning to do, Victoria, if you think you can hurt me. Tori met her mother's gaze. You think I came here for revenge? This is called an escape. Escape? So you're going to run off and live on the streets? Daddy's princess sleeping in alleys. Tori's eyes flashed, but she only said calmly, I'll be fine. With what? Did you bring money? A bank card. And how would I get that, when you locked me up? I bet Chloe has some. I bet she never left her room without it, just in case. They both looked at me. I didn't say a word, but my answer must have shown on my face. Mrs. Enright laughed. Oh, I'm going to get money, Mom, Tori said. I'll take it from you. She slammed her arms down and a wave of energy smacked into her mother and me, tottering us backward. Tori waved her hands over her head. Sparks flew, caught in a gust of wind that wailed around us in a whirlwind of dirt and sawdust. I squeezed my eyes shut and covered my nose and mouth. You call that powerful magic, Victoria, her mother shouted over the wind. It's a temper tantrum. You haven't changed at all. Only now, you call on the forces of nature to howl and stomp for you. You think that's all I can do? Just watch. Tori froze in a binding spell. The wind stopped. The dust and sparks fluttered to the floor. I'm watching, Mrs. Enright said, and all I see is a spoiled brat with a fancy new car, tearing around, not caring who gets hurt. As selfish and inconsiderate as ever. Tori's eyes glistened with tears. As her mother advanced on her, I eased back toward the pile of metal pipes. Now, Victoria, if you're done throwing tantrums, I'm going to call Lauren to come and get you, and hopefully she can manage to keep you this time. Liz was circling toward Mrs. Enright, her gaze on another pile of crates. I shook my head. The angle was wrong and she'd see it falling. I bent and lifted a bar. Lauren Fellows won't be the only person reprimanded for this little escapade, Mrs. Enright continued. You've just earned yourself a week in your room, alone, no classes, no visitors, no MP3 player. Just a lot of time to think about. I swung the pipe. It hit the back of her head with an ugly thwack. The weapon flew from my hands. She teetered and I thought I hadn't hit her hard enough. I tripped over my feet to get to the pipe, now rolling away. Then she fell. Tori broke from the spell and raced to her mother, dropping beside her. I did the same and checked her pulse. I think she's okay, I said. Tori just knelt there, staring down at her mother. I touched her arm. If we want to go, we have. She shook me off. I leaped to my feet, ready to leave her. Then I realized what she was doing, checking her mother's pockets. Nothing, she said through her teeth. Not even a credit card. I've got money. Come on. One last look at her mother, and she followed. 12. Tori and I huddled under the tarp covering a trailer bed. There wasn't a cab attached, so we were in no danger of our hiding place rolling away. I thought that made it the perfect spot. Tori disagreed. We're sitting ducks here, she hissed, crouching. All they have to do is lift this cover and they'll see us. If they get close, we'll run. And how will we know that? We can't see anything. Liz is scouting. I uncrossed my legs. About Liz. She's dead. Her voice was a harsh rasp. I heard my mother. She killed Liz, didn't she? Her and those people. I'll explain later. We need to be quiet. Someone could hear. No one's around, remember? Because Liz, my friend Liz, is a ghost and she's standing watch. Apparently, she's been helping you for God knows how long, and you didn't even bother to tell me she was dead, that they murdered her. I told Ray. Of course. Rachel. How's that working out for you? Tori met my gaze. If you want to know who betrayed you guys, look in that direction. Ray? No. She'd never. Well, someone told. If it wasn't me or you, or the guys, who does that leave? We should be quiet. Sound travels. Really? Wow. Now you give science lessons, too. Did Derek teach you that? Tori. What? Shut it. She did, for about 5 seconds, then said, shouldn't Liz have checked in by now? How do you know she's still out there? She comes and goes. That's why I needed that sweatshirt too. Liz dashed through the tarp and stooped over us. Tell her to shhh. I already did, I whispered. Repeatedly. Well, they've heard, and they're on their way. It's your aunt and a guy with a gun. I relayed this to Tori in whispers. What? Why are we sitting here then? She darted for the side. I grabbed her arm. Hey, she said, loud enough to make Liz wince. Which way are they coming from? I asked Liz. She pointed left. I crawled to the right side and lifted the tarp. Liz hurried out. I don't see them now. I squinted against the sun. There was a building about 20 feet away, but I couldn't see a door. I leaned out for a better look. To my left was a cluster of rusty barrels. We could hide between. Chloe! Liz yelled. He's right. A thump on the trailer bed cut her off. Back up! Liz said. Back up! What's going on? Tori whispered. Move! When I tried to back up, Tori shoved me and I flew out from under the trailer, doing a faceplant in the dirt. Well, that made it easy, said a voice. I rolled onto my back. There, on the trailer bed, stood Mike, the man who'd shot at us Saturday night. Lauren, he said. Better give me that gun. I'll handle this. Gaze still fixed on me, he jumped to the ground. He put out his hand as Aunt Lauren came around the back of the trailer, rifle in her hands. I'm sorry, Chloe, she said. She aimed the gun at me and I scuttled back. And no. I won't fight. She swung the gun and fired at Mike. The dart hit his arm. He stared at it. Then his knees gave way. Aunt Lauren ran over and helped me up. Tori, get out of there. He radioed the others when we heard you. I backed away, my gaze on Aunt Lauren as I motioned for Tori to be ready to run. Aunt Lauren grabbed my arm, but when I pulled away, she released her grip and stepped back. Why do you think I shot him? She said. Why did I let Tori get away from me so easily? I'm trying to help. We'll find the boys, then we'll find Kit Simon's dad. A weird ringing sounded in my ears. I think it was my heart, shouting for joy. Aunt Lauren had realized she was wrong. She still loved me. She was going to make it up to me, fix my problems like she always did, and make everything okay. Could I have imagined anything more perfect? No, and that's why I took another slow step back, fingers at my side, waving for Tori to get ready to bolt. I'd been tricked too often to fall for a fairy tale ending now. Chloe, please. Aunt Lauren held out the insulin pouch. As I reached for it, she caught my hand. I made a mistake, Chloe. A huge mistake. But I'm going to fix it. She handed me the pouch. Now head that way. She pointed toward the factory. Stick to the shadows. I need to hide him under the truck. Aunt Lauren caught up and we circled the warehouses, heading toward the front gates. She swore no one from the Edison group was covering the front. Though we hadn't seen employees wandering around outside, the group wouldn't risk getting too close to the factory. And if she was lying and leading us into a trap? I hoped Tori's spells would get us through. At the far side of the yard, we paused behind a warehouse to catch our breaths. Okay, girls, Aunt Lauren said. There's a delivery gate over there. It's closed, but you both should be able to squeeze through. Head right 2 blocks, then along the street to the end. You'll see a 7-Eleven. I nodded. I know where it is. Good. Go around the back of the store and wait. I'll meet you there. Tori sprinted off, but I stood there, looking at Aunt Lauren. Chloe. Tori didn't turn us in, did she? No. Now. It was Ray, wasn't it? Aunt Lauren paused, and I saw the answer in her eyes. I'm not the only one who mistakenly thought she was doing the right thing, Chloe. I started to turn away. She caught my arm and held out a folded envelope. An explanation and some money. When I didn't take it, she leaned around and put it into my back pocket. If you decide to keep running, I won't blame you. But, please, give me a chance. One last chance. I nodded. She pulled me into a hug and kissed my cheek, then let me go. Tori had already rounded the corner of the building, disappearing from sight when Liz shrieked behind me. Chloe. I spun so fast I lost my balance. Aunt Lauren gestured for me to keep going, but I saw only the figure behind her. Tori's mom. I shouted a warning, but Mrs. Enright's hand flew out. A bolt shot from her fingertips. It hit Aunt Lauren with a horrible sizzling pop, knocking her off her feet. Blood flew from her lips, spraying the concrete as she fell. 13. I started to run to Aunt Lauren. I made it a few feet before Tori's mom locked me in a binding spell. I dimly heard her say something, but I didn't know what it was. My ears were filled with my own silent screams as I stared at Aunt Lauren, motionless on the ground. Finally Mrs. Enright's voice came through. I should probably ask where my darling daughter is. Right here, said a voice behind me. Mrs. Enright's head lifted. Her brow furrowed. Her lips parted. Then she jolted backward, hit by a spell from Tori. My binding broke. I lurched toward Aunt Lauren, but Tori grabbed my arm. "We have to go," she said. "No. Mrs. Enright recovered, hands flying as she launched a spell. Tori yanked me out of the way and it hit the wall, blasting a blackened crater. "You can fight her," I said. "Stop her, and I'll get the gun." "I can't." Tori heaved on my arm. I pulled away. She muttered "Fine, let go," then raced off, disappearing around the corner. Tori's mom lifted her hands again. Then a voice shouted, distracting her, "They're over here." I took one last look at Aunt Lauren and ran. There was no way we were getting to that delivery gate now. I soon realized why Aunt Lauren had sent us ahead, so she could watch our backs, because we'd be exposed to any employees entering the side yard and we couldn't afford to raise any alarms. We peered around the corner of the next building, saw that open expanse, heard voices coming, and knew we'd never make it. "Now what?" Tori said. I didn't answer. "Come on," she whispered. "What's the plan?" I wanted to grab her and shake her and tell her there was no plan. I couldn't even wrap my head around the concept. My aunt might be dead. Dead. That's all I could think about. "Chloe," she whispered. "Hurry. What are we going to do?" I longed to tell her to leave me alone. Come up with her own plan. Then I saw her eyes, bright with fear fast turning into panic, and the words died in my throat. She'd just learned Liz was dead. She'd seen my aunt possibly killed by her mother. Neither of us was in any shape to think, but one of us had to. "Your aunt said the Edison group won't come close to the front," she said. "If we run for it, they'll make an exception. Or find a way to cut us off." But, I looked around. My gaze stopped on the huge building dominating the yard. The factory. "What?" "Stay close to me." I knew of 2 doors: the emergency exit we'd escaped from Saturday night and the main entrance Derek had broken into. The main doors were closest. As we headed for them, I whispered to Liz, asking her to run ahead and scout the way. If someone was coming, she'd whistle. The door was in an alcove. I darted in and I pressed against the wall while Liz zipped through the door. She was back in a second. "There's a guard dead ahead," she said. "I'll distract him. You open the door a crack and listen for my whistle. You know a place to hide, right?" I nodded. When we were here Saturday, Derek had us opening all the doors, searching for an exit, and I remembered a storage room that would be perfect. When Liz gave the all clear, I eased open the door. Tori danced impatiently behind me, though I'd asked her to watch for anyone approaching. Inside, Liz was at a closed door 20 feet away. The guard stood beside her, staring down at the knob as it slowly turned one way, then the other. We slipped past. I could hear the distant rumble and thump of machinery and the laughs and shouts of workers. This section, though, was quiet. We made it to the side hall easily, as the guard stood transfixed by that mysterious turning doorknob. Liz raced up behind us. "Where to?" I gestured to the adjoining hall. She sprinted ahead, turned the corner, and whistled the all clear. Our luck held, and we made it safely into the storage room. As its door closed, the guard's voice echoed down the empty halls. "Hey, Pete, come here. You gotta see this." The knob was turning by itself. I tell you, ever since Dan did a nosedive into the saws, this place has been haunted. He was right. Saturday night, I'd seen the ghost of a man jump into those saws. Then he'd reappeared and done it again. Was that some kind of penance? Aunt Lauren had done bad things, maybe even committed murder. If she was dead, would she go to hell? Was she? I swallowed hard. What now? Tori whispered. I looked around. The room was the size of a classroom and full of boxes. Find a place in the back, I said. There's lots of dust, which means they don't come in here very often. We'll hide. Liz ran through the door. They're coming. Wah! Dr. Davidoff and Sue. She saw you by the doors. Thanks to Tori, who'd kept such a good watch. Are they inside? I asked. Not yet. Is who inside? Tori asked as Liz took off. What's going on? What did she say? I told her, then opened the door a crack. What are you doing? She said, tugging my sleeve. Are you nuts? Close that. Tell her to be quiet, and she got louder. Tell her to stay back, and she pushed me into the line of fire. Tell her to watch for our pursuers, and she hovered at my shoulder instead. Open the door to listen, and she wanted to drag me back inside. Ah! The beginning of a beautiful friendship. Friendship? We'd be lucky if we survived a temporary partnership. I told her I was trying to listen. When she argued, I glared, and for once in my life, it actually worked. Her mouth shut and she backed into the room, sulky and glowering, but silent. Can I help you? The guard's voice echoed down the hall. Yes, we're looking for 2 teenage girls, Dr. Davidoff replied. We believe they came in here. They're runaways from a nearby group home. They're 15 years old. One's about 5'6", short dark hair. The other is 5 feet, reddish blonde hair. With red streaks, Sue added. Painted red streaks. The guard chuckled. Sounds like my kid, only hers are blue. Last week they were purple. Teenagers, Dr. Davidoff said with a fake laugh. These 2 of ours are always slipping away. You know what girls are like. Running off to see their boyfriends and buy new lip gloss. They don't mean any harm, but we worry about them. Sure. If I see them, I'll give you a shout. You got a card? We're quite certain they're in here. Nope. This is the only door that opens from the outside, and I've been at my post all shift. I understand. But perhaps if we could take a look. A chair squeaked and I pictured the beefy man rising. This is a factory, folks. Do you have any idea how many safety regulations I'd be breaking if I let you poke around? We'll wear hard hats and safety glasses. This isn't a public building. You can't come in here without an appointment and an escort. May we speak to the plant manager, then? He's out. Meeting. All day. I told you, no one got past me. Your girls aren't in here. But if you really want to check, that's fine. Get the cops and I'll let you in. We'd prefer not to involve the police. Well, you're gonna have to, 'cause it's the only way you're getting past me. After the guard chased them off, we holed up to wait for dark. We each found a separate spot, far enough apart that we had an excuse for not chatting. That was fine with me at first. Like Tori and I would have anything to chat about. But after a while, even bickering would have been better than this silent waiting with nothing to do but think. And cry. I did a lot of that, as quietly as I could. I'd taken out the envelope so often it was covered in tear stains. I wanted to open it, but I was terrified that whatever was in it wouldn't be a good enough explanation, that it couldn't be good enough, and I so desperately needed it to be. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I ripped it open. Inside was money, but I shoved that into my pocket without counting it, then unfolded the letter. Aunt Lauren started by explaining how necromancy worked. In necromancer families, not everyone saw ghosts. Most didn't. Aunt Lauren didn't. Nor had my mom or their parents. But my uncle had. My mother's twin brother, Ben. I'd never known she'd even had a twin. Aunt Lauren wrote. Ben died long before you were born. Your mom would have showed you pictures, but you were too young to understand. After she was gone, there just didn't seem any point in bringing it up. He started seeing ghosts when he was a little older than you are now. He went away to college with your mom, but it was too much for him. He came home. Your mom wanted to quit and come back, too, to keep an eye on him. He insisted she stay at school. I said I'd watch over him, but I didn't really understand what he was going through. When he was 19, he died in a fall. Whether he jumped or whether he was running from ghosts, we never knew. Did it matter? Either way, his powers had killed him. I kept telling myself ghosts couldn't hurt me, but in my gut I knew I was wrong, and here was the proof. Just because you can't reach out and push someone off a roof, doesn't mean you can't kill him. Your mom had been looking for help for Ben before he died. Our family had some connections in the necromancer world, and eventually someone gave her a contact name for the Edison group. Only Ben went off the roof a month before she got the message. Later, when I started med school, I contacted them. If they were scientists, they could use doctors, and if I could help people like Ben, that's what I wanted to do. Your mom wasn't involved. Not then. That didn't come until she wanted to have a child. She'd planned to have kids even after what happened to her brother? As if in answer to my question, Aunt Lauren wrote. You have to understand, Chloe, it's like any other genetic disorder. It's a risk we accept. If we have a child and she has the power, then we deal with that. Your mother wouldn't take that risk, though. Not after Ben. She wanted to adopt, but with your father, that wasn't an option. There were things in his past. The agencies didn't consider him a suitable parent. Your mother was miserable. She wanted children so badly. She looked into other alternatives, but they all cost money, and at that time, your parents were living in a rat-infested hole downtown. Every penny they earned went to your father's new business. Then I told her about a breakthrough with the Edison group. A team had isolated the genes that conferred powers for necromancers. By testing the potential carrier of that gene code and the proposed human parent, we could determine the likelihood that a child of that union would be a necromancer. Jenny was so excited. I ran the tests on her and your dad, and it was almost certain that any child they had would be a necromancer. I tried to persuade her to consider other options, maybe artificial insemination with another biological father. But she was so tired and so crushed that she just didn't have the energy to consider alternatives. And she suspected I was trying to come between her and your dad, because I'd made it clear I didn't think he was right for her. We didn't talk for almost a year. Then, I called her with the most amazing news. A breakthrough, here at the lab. We couldn't give her a child who wasn't a necromancer, but we could eliminate the dangers that killed our brother. She could have a child who could speak to the dead on her own terms. But it hadn't worked out that way, as I knew. When I started seeing ghosts so abruptly, Aunt Lauren said she'd told herself nothing was wrong. I wasn't one of the failures, I just needed time to adjust to my new powers. The Edison group had insisted I go to Lyle House, though, and she'd agreed, still expecting they'd discover I was fine, and then I could be told the truth. She'd kept believing that until she learned that I'd raised zombies at Lyle House. Still, she told herself it was okay, we'd deal with it. The group had promised that no matter what happened, I wouldn't be killed. A necromancer wasn't dangerous, they told her, so there was no reason to terminate me. Still worried, she'd started digging for answers, just like I had, and she learned the same thing I had, that they'd lied. Apparently, they'd lied about a lot of things, she said, though she didn't go into detail. That's what changed everything for me, Chloe. I know it's horrible to admit I only realized my mistakes when my own niece's life was in danger. Until then I'd done what I thought was right, the greater good and such. But, in doing that, I forgot my oath as a doctor, to first do no harm. I did harm and I'm sure I'll pay the price, but I won't let you pay it with me. That's why I had to get you out. 3 final paragraphs. In the first, she said that if I was reading this letter, then she hadn't gotten away with me. If I'd left her behind, she understood. If she'd been killed, that was the price she'd paid. And if she'd been taken by the Edison group, I wasn't to go back for her. I was to keep going and find Simon and his dad, Kit. She had no idea what had happened to Kit. She'd searched the Edison group files and she was convinced they weren't involved in his disappearance, but that was it. She also told me to make sure I wore my necklace always. I remembered how quick she'd been to get it back for me when I went to Lyle House without it. In the letter, she didn't say much about it, only that it was supposed to ward off ghosts. But it didn't. Or maybe it was working, and if I lost it, I'd start seeing a lot more ghosts, my powers running unchecked. The next bit was about my dad. He didn't know anything, not even about me being a necromancer. So if I escaped and she didn't, I needed to stay away from him. Then came the final paragraph. 3 more sentences. She wanted a child so badly, Chloe. And you are just as wonderful as she imagined. You were the center of her world. Tears burned my eyes, that old never quite healed ache flaring. I took a deep, shuddering breath, folded the letter, and put it back in my pocket. We'd been there over an hour when Liz came racing in with the news. She's not dead. Your aunt. She's okay. From the excitement on Liz's face, you'd think she'd just learned her own aunt had survived. It didn't matter that Aunt Lauren was part of the group that murdered her. All she cared about was that this news would please me. Looking at her glowing face, I realized that as good as I tried to be, I could never be as selfless as Liz. My relief was cut short by a fresh worry. What would they do to Aunt Lauren now that she'd helped us escape? Now that she'd betrayed them? Thinking of that reminded me of another betrayal. Ray's. I'd trusted her. I'd vouched for her to the guys, persuaded them to let her join us, and she'd turned us in. Ray was the one who'd insisted that the boys weren't coming back. She was the one who suggested I go to Aunt Lauren, who'd talked me into it when I'd hesitated. I remembered the night we'd left, lying in our beds trying to sleep. She'd been so excited about her powers and not the least concerned about what lay ahead of us. Now I knew why she hadn't been worried. Aunt Lauren said Ray honestly thought she was helping me. Betrayal as tough love, forcing me onto the path chosen for me, certain she was right and I was just too stubborn to see it. Now both she and my aunt were trapped with the Edison group. Once the glow over her new life faded, Ray would see the cracks and pick away at them until she realized the truth. I hoped she didn't. I prayed both of them would just hold tight and do whatever the Edison group wanted until I could return. And I would return. Finally Liz popped in to tell me that Dr. Davidoff and his crew had given up, assuming Tori and I had snuck past the front gates and were long gone. They'd left a guard behind, keeping watch from some hidden spot, in case Derek showed up, following my trail. At 5, the whistle blew, the workday ending. By 5:30, the building was empty. Still we waited. Past 6, past 7. It must be dark out by now, Tori whispered, crawling over to me. Dusk, not dark. We'll give it another hour. At 8, we left. 14. We snuck past the night guard, who was busy reading Playboy in the lunchroom. Liz stayed with him to make sure he didn't hear us. He didn't. Luckily Tori and I had the good fortune to dress in dark clothes that morning, Tori in a navy American Eagle sweatsuit and leather jacket, me in jeans and a green shirt. I only wished I had more than this thin jacket. With the sun gone it was freezing, made worse by an icy blast that had to be coming straight across the river from Canada. Once inside the warehouse, we wouldn't have to worry about the wind. Getting there, though, was taking forever. Liz was having trouble finding the Edison Group guard, so we had to go the long way around, scooting from hiding place to hiding place, to reach the real rendezvous point, the warehouse where Ray and I had waited for Derek and Simon. As it had been the other night, the warehouse door was latched but not locked. Unless you knew a hot black market in cardboard boxes, crates, and wooden pallets, there was nothing inside to steal. All that worthless junk made it the perfect place to hide, and meant there were a million spots for the guys to leave a note. After a few minutes of banging around in the dark, I gave up. We'll have to wait until morning, I said. No response. I squinted around for Tori. This is my stop, she said, somewhere to my left. This is where I get off. Her voice was oddly monotone, like she was too tired to put any bite into the words. My adventure, as fun as it's been, ends here. Just hold on until morning. If there isn't a note, we'll figure something out. And if there is a note? I wanted to join your escape, Chloe, not your crusade to find Simon's dad. Be but Hill. Save the day. She managed a sarcastic lilt. Rescue us from the mad scientists, cure us, and take us to a land of lollipops and unicorns. My voice hardened. Finding him might not solve anything, but right now, we're a little short on options. What are you going to do instead? Go back to the Edison Group and say you're sorry, it was all a mistake. I'm doing what I planned all along. We needed each other to get out. But that's all I wanted from you. I'd help you find the note, but I won't stay until morning to do it. I'm going home, to my dad. That shut me up, if only because I was afraid I'd say something I'd regret, like ask if she meant her dad or her father. Did she know there was a difference? I doubted it. So your dad? He's human. Of course. He doesn't know anything about this. But I'm going to tell him. Is that such a good idea? He's my dad, she snapped. When he hears what my mom did, everything's going to be okay. My dad and me get along great. Better than him and my mom. They hardly even talk. I'm sure they only stay together because of us kids. Maybe you should wait a day or two. See what happens. She laughed. And join your band of superheroes? Sorry, but I'm allergic to spandex. Her sneakers scuffed on the concrete as she turned away. Say bye to Liz for me. Wait. I tugged off my shoe. Take some money. Save it. I don't plan to ever get the chance to repay you. It's okay. Just take. Keep your money, Chloe. You'll need it more than I will. She took a few steps, then stopped. For a moment, she stood there, then she said quietly, "You could come with me. I need to get Simon his insulin." "Right. Okay then." I waited for a goodbye but heard only the slap of her sneakers, then the creaking of the door as she left. When Liz returned from patrol, she said she'd seen Tori leaving. I explained, then braced for a chewing out. Why had I let Tori take off? Why hadn't I gone after her? But all Liz said was, "I guess she didn't want to hang around," and that was that. We were both quiet for a while, then Liz said, "I'm sorry I didn't believe you. About me being dead. I handled it wrong. I should have made it easier for you." "I don't think there's any way to make that easier." We sat side by side in the darkness on a piece of cardboard I'd dragged over. My back rested against a crate. I'd stacked more around me, like a play fort. A small, dark, cold fortress. "Why'd they kill me?" Liz asked. I told her about the experiment and the genetic manipulation and what the file said about terminating us if we couldn't be rehabilitated. "But I could have been rehabilitated," she said. "If they'd just told me what was going on, I wouldn't have been freaking out about poltergeists. I would have taken lessons, pills, whatever they wanted." "I know. So why?" "Why?" The only answer I had was that we didn't matter to them. We were subjects in an experiment. They'd try rehabilitation because we weren't animals, but Lyle House had been only a token effort, to prove to themselves that they'd made some attempt to save us. They said they killed us because we were dangerous. I didn't believe that. I wasn't dangerous. Brady wasn't dangerous. Maybe Liz and Derek, but they weren't monsters. Derek had been willing to stay at Lyle House just so he wouldn't hurt anyone else. They played God and they failed, and I think what they were really scared of wasn't that we'd hurt people but that other supernaturals would find out what they'd done. So they killed their failures, leaving only the successes. That's what I thought. "I don't know" was what I said, and we sat quietly for a while longer. Next time, I was the one to break the silence. "Thank you. For everything. Without you, Tori and I would never have gotten away. I want to help you in return, help you cross over." "Cross over?" "To the other side. Wherever ghosts are supposed to go. The afterlife." "Oh. I'm not sure why you haven't gone. Have you seen anything?" "A light maybe." A small laugh. "I think that's only in movies, Chloe. But you vanish sometimes. Where do you go?" "I'm not sure. I still see everything here, but you can't see me. It's like being on the other side of a force field, where I can see well. I guess they must be other ghosts, but they seem to be just passing through." "Where do they come from?" She shrugged. "I don't talk to them. I thought maybe they were other shaman spirits, but her gaze dropped. I didn't want to ask. In case they weren't. Can you ask them now? Find out where you're supposed to be." "I'm fine. But not yet. Just not yet, okay? Okay. When you do find Simon and Derek, I'm going to take off for a while. I want to visit my Nana, see how she's doing, and my brother, maybe my friends, my school. I know they can't see me. I'd just like to see them." I nodded. Liz wanted me to sleep. I closed my eyes to make her feel better, but there was no chance of drifting off. I was too cold, too hungry. When she slipped out to patrol, I stretched and shifted. The chill of the concrete came right through my cardboard mat. I was crawling over to grab more layers when Liz reappeared. "Good, you're awake. What's wrong? Is someone coming?" "No, it's Tori. She's in front of the warehouse. She's just sitting there. I found Tori crouched between the warehouse and a dumpster, staring at the rusty bin, not even blinking. Tori. I had to touch her shoulder before she looked at me. Come inside. She followed me without a word. I showed her the spot I'd made, and she settled in, crouching in her strange way. What happened? I asked. It took a moment for her to answer. I called my dad. I told him everything. He said to stay where I was, and he'd come and get me. And you changed your mind. That's okay. I went across the street to wait, she said, as if I hadn't spoken. I was in an alley, so no one would see me before he got there. The car pulled up and I started to step out and I didn't. I kept telling myself I was being stupid, that I'd been around you too long, getting all paranoid, but I needed to see him first, to be sure. It was his car, my dad's. It stopped right where I said I'd be. It idled there, all the windows up, too dark to see through. Then a door opened and her voice dropped. It was my mom. She must have intercepted the call, I said. Maybe they switched cars. Or she got to his car first, knowing you'd be looking for it. He was probably on his way, in her car, and I snuck away and called my house again, collect. My dad answered, and I hung up. I'm sorry. More silence. Then, not even going to say I told you so. Of course not. She shook her head. You're too nice, Chloe. And I don't mean that as a compliment. There's nice, and then there's too nice. Anyway, I'm back. She reached into her pocket, and pulled out something. With food. She handed me a Snickers bar. Thanks. I thought you didn't have any money. I don't. 5-finger discount. Her sneakers squeaked on the concrete as she shifted farther onto the cardboard mat. I've watched my friends do it plenty of times. But I never did. Know why? She didn't wait for an answer. Because I was afraid of getting caught. Not by the store or the cops. I didn't care about that. All they do is give you a lecture, make you pay it back. I was afraid of my mom finding out. Afraid she'd be disappointed in me. A crackle as she unwrapped her candy bar, then broke off a piece. Not really an issue now, is it? She popped the chunk into her mouth. 15. ONCE, my stomach had something in it, even a candy bar. Exhaustion took over. I wasn't asleep long before the dreams came, nightmares of never finding the guys, of Mrs. Enright killing Aunt Lauren, of Tori hog-tying me and leaving me for the Edison group to find. I awoke to the sound of voices. I leaped up, breath jamming in my throat, searching the darkness for men with guns. Beside me, Tori was snoring. Liz. I whispered. No answer. She must have been out on patrol. After a moment, I decided I'd dreamed the voices. Then the sound came again, a PSST, 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 too faint to make out the words. I strained to hear but could only catch that papery whisper. I blinked hard. The unending darkness became a landscape of black jagged rocks, boxes and crates. Only a pale moon glow made it through the thick grime coating the windows. I caught a whiff of something musky, animal-like. Rats? I shivered. The sound came again. A papery rustling, like the wind through dry leaves. Maybe that's what it was. Dry leaves in April? When the nearest tree is hundreds of feet away. No, it sounded like a ghost. Like the scary movie version, where all you hear is a wordless whispering that creeps down your spine and tells you there's something lurking just around. I shook myself, then stood and stretched my legs. I scuffed my sneakers against the cardboard carpet a little more than necessary, hoping Tori might stir. She didn't. I exhaled, cheeks ballooning. I'd been doing well so far, facing my fears and taking action. This wasn't the time to bury my head and plug my ears. If my powers were abnormally strong. Uncontrollable. No, not uncontrollable. Dad would say that everything can be controlled if you have the willpower and the will to learn. The whisper seemed to come from the next room. I picked my way through the maze of boxes and crates. As careful as I was, I kept knocking my knees against them, and each rap made me wince. With every step I took, the whispering seemed to move farther away. I was clear across the warehouse before I realized the sound was moving away. A ghost was luring me. I stopped short, my scalp prickling as I peered through the darkness, boxes looming in every direction. The whisper snaked around me. I whirled and crashed into a stack of crates. A sliver jabbed into my palm. I took a deep breath, then asked, "Do you want to talk to me?" The whispers stopped. I waited. No? Fine, then I'm going back. A giggle erupted behind me. I spun, smacking into the crates again, dust flying into my mouth, my nose, my eyes. As I sputtered, the giggle turned to a snicker. I could see enough to know no living person was attached to that snicker. I marched back the way I'd come. The whispers followed, right at my ear now, escalating to a guttural moan that made goosebumps rise on my arms. I remembered what the necromancer's ghost at Lyle House had said, that he'd followed me from the hospital, where he'd been dealing with ghosts pestering mental patients. I guess if you're a sadistic moron who's been stuck in limbo for years, haunting mental patients or young necromancers might seem like a fun way to pass the time. The moaning turned to a weird keening, like the wailing souls of the tormented dead. I wheeled toward the noise. "Are you having fun? Well, guess what? If you keep it up, you're going to find out that I'm a lot more powerful than you think. I'll yank you out of there whether you want to show yourself or not." My delivery was pitch-perfect, strong and steady, but the ghost just gave a derisive snort, then resumed keening. I felt my way to a crate, brushed dust off the top, and sat. "One last chance or I'm pulling you through." 2 seconds of silence. Then the moaning again, right at my ear. I almost toppled off the crate. The ghost snickered. I closed my eyes and summoned, careful to keep my power on low, just in case his body was nearby. I might get some satisfaction from slamming him back into his rotting corpse, but I'd regret it later. The moaning stopped. At a grunt of surprise, I smiled and amped it up, just a little. The figure started to materialize, short, chubby guy old enough to be my grandfather. He twisted and writhed like he was caught in a straitjacket. I pulled harder. A dull thump nearby made me jump. "Liz!" I called. "Tori!" The ghost snarled. "Let me go, you little..." Another thump drowned out the nasty name he called me, or most of it. Then came a weird skittering noise. "Let me go or I..." I closed my eyes and gave the ghost one big mental shove. He gasped and sailed backward through the wall, like he'd been thrown out of a spaceship airlock. I waited to see if he'd return. He didn't. I'd cast him to the other side, wherever ghosts live. Good. Another thump. I scrambled to my feet, the ghost forgotten. I crept past a stack of crates and listened. Silence. "Tori," I whispered. "Liz." If it's not them, maybe calling their names isn't such a bright idea." I eased along the crates until I reached a gap. Through it, I saw the pale rectangle of a window. The grime was smudged, like someone had haphazardly rubbed it away. The scratching sound came again. Then the smell hit, like that musky odor in the other room, only 10 times worse. The skittering came again like tiny claws on concrete. Rats! As I pulled back, the window darkened. Then thump! I looked up too late to see what it was. Was someone throwing stuff at the window? Maybe the boys, trying to get my attention. I hurried forward, forgetting the rats, until I saw a dark blob on the shadowy floor, moving slow, like it was dragging something. That must be what I smelled, a dead animal that the rat was taking back to the nest. When something brushed the top of my head, I yelped, clapping my hands over my mouth. A shadow flew past and hit the window with that familiar thump. As it fell, I noticed thin, leathery wings. A bat. The dim shape flapped its wings against the concrete, making a scratchy, rustling noise. Weren't bats supposed to fly by echolocation? It shouldn't hit a window trying to escape. Unless it was rabid. The bat finally launched itself again. It fluttered away, weaving and bobbing like it was still dazed. It headed for the ceiling, then turned and came straight at me. As I stumbled back, my foot slipped, and I fell with a bone-jarring crack that set my injured arm on fire. I tried to leap up, but whatever I'd stepped on was stuck to my sneaker, sending me skidding again. The thing on my sneaker was slick and cold. I pulled it off and raised it into the moonlight. Pinched between my fingers was a rotting wing. The bat I'd seen still had both of its wings, so there must be another one in here, dead. I threw the wing across the room and frantically wiped my hand on my jeans. The bat swooped again. I ducked, but my foot slid out and I fell. As I hit the floor, a horrible smell enveloped me, so strong I coughed. Then I saw the bat, less than a foot away, teeth bared, long fangs white against the dark. The cloud cover shifted, the light streaming into the room, and I realized I wasn't looking at fangs but at white patches of skull. The bat was decomposing, one eye shriveled, the other a black pit. Most of the flesh was gone, only hanging bits remaining. The bat had no ears, no nose, just a bony snout. The snout opened. Rows of tiny jagged teeth flashed, and it started to shriek, a horrible garbled squeaking. My shrieks joined it as I scrambled back. The thing pulled itself along on one crumpled wing. It was definitely a bat and I'd raised it from the dead. With my gaze fixed on the bat creeping toward me, I forgot about the other one until it flew at my face. I saw it coming, then saw its sunken eyes, stumps of ears, and bone showing through patchy fur. Another zombie bat. I slammed back into the crates. My hands sailed up to ward the bat off, but too late. It hit my face. I screamed then, really screamed as the rotted wings drummed me. The cold body hit my cheek. Tiny claws caught in my hair. I tried to smack it away. It dropped. As I clapped my hands to my mouth, I felt something tugging at my shirt. I looked down to see the bat clinging to it. Its fur wasn't patchy at all. What I'd mistaken for spots of bone were wriggling maggots. I pressed one hand to my mouth, stifling my screams. With my free hand, I swatted at it, but it clung there, rows of teeth opening and closing, head bobbing like it was trying to see me. Chloe? Chloe! Liz raced through the outside wall. She stopped short, eyes going huge. Oh my god! Oh my god! Gee, get it off! P please! I whirled, still swatting at the bat. Then I heard a sickening crunch as I stepped on the other one. When I wheeled, the one clinging to me fell off. As it hit the floor, Liz shoved the top crate off a stack and it fell on the fallen bat, the thud drowning out that horrible bone-crunching noise. I. It's okay, she said, walking toward me. It's dead. And no. It's... Liz stopped. She looked down at the bat I'd stepped on. It lifted one wing feebly, then let it fall. The wing twitched, claw scratching the concrete. Liz hurried to a crate. I'll put it out of its misery. No, I held out my hand. That won't work. It's already dead. No, it's not. She bent for a closer look, finally seeing the decomposing body. She stumbled back. Oh, it's dead. I raised it from the dead. She looked at me. And her expression, she tried to hide it, but I'll never forget that look, the shock, the horror, the disgust. She began. You can. It was an accident. There was a ghost pestering me. I was summoning him and I must have accidentally raised them. The bat's wing fluttered again. I dropped beside it. I tried not to look, but of course I couldn't help seeing the tiny body crushed on the concrete, bones sticking out. And still it moved, struggling to get up, claws scraping the concrete, smashed head rising. I closed my eyes and concentrated on freeing its spirit. After a few minutes, the scratching stopped. I opened my eyes. The bat lay still. So what was it? A zombie? Liz tried to sound calm, but her voice cracked. Something like that. You can resurrect the dead. I stared at the crushed bat. I wouldn't call it resurrection. What about people? Can you? She swallowed. Do that? I nodded. So that's what Tori's mom meant. You raised zombies at Lyle House. Accidentally. Uncontrollable powers. Liz continued. So it's, like in the movies? They're just empty, what's the word? Reanimated. I wasn't about to tell her the truth, that necromancers didn't reanimate a soulless body. We took a ghost like Liz and shoved her back into her rotting corpse. I remembered what the demi-demon said, about me nearly returning the souls of 1,000 dead to their buried shells. I hadn't believed her. Now. Bile filled my mouth. I turned away, gagging and spitting it out. It's okay, Liz said, coming up beside me. It's not your fault. I looked at the box she'd shoved onto the other bat, took a deep breath, and walked to it. When I reached to move it, she said, it's dead. It must be. She stopped and said in a small, shaky voice. Isn't it? I need to be sure. I lifted the box. 16. Teehee bat wasn't dead. It was. I don't want to remember it. By that point, I'd been so stressed out that I couldn't concentrate, and freeing the bat's spirit had taken a while. But I did it. And I was glad I'd checked. Now I could relax, or so I thought. You should sleep, Liz said after I'd lain there with my eyes open for almost an hour. I glanced at Tori, but she was still snoring, hadn't even stirred since I'd come back. I'm not tired, I said. You need to rest. I can help. I always helped my Nana sleep when she couldn't. Liz never talked about her parents, only her grandmother, and I realized how little I knew about her. You lived with your Nana? She nodded. My mom's mom. I didn't know my dad. Nana said he didn't stick around. Considering he'd been a demon, I supposed that was how it worked. Liz was silent a moment, then said quietly, I think she was raped. Your mom? I heard stuff. Stuff I wasn't supposed to hear, Nana talking to her sisters, her friends, and later to social workers. She said Mom was wild when she was young. Not really wild, just smoking and drinking beer and skipping classes. Then she got pregnant, and that made her different. She got older. Things I heard, I think she was raped. That's awful. She pulled her knees up and hugged them. I never told anyone that. It's not the kind of thing you share. Kids might look at you funny, you know. I'd never. I know. That's why I told you. Anyway, for a few years, everything was okay. We lived with Nana, and she looked after me while Mom worked. But then Mom had this accident. My gut chilled as I thought of my own mother, killed in a hit and run. What kind of accident? The cops said she was at this party, got drunk, and fell down the stairs. She hit her head really hard, and when she got out of the hospital, it was like she was a whole different person. She couldn't work, so Nana did, and Mom stayed home with me, but sometimes she'd forget to feed me lunch, or she'd get really mad and hit me and say it was all my fault. Blaming me because she wasn't happy, I guess. I'm sure she didn't mean it. I know. Afterward she'd cry and tell me she was sorry and buy me candy. Then she had my little brother, and she started getting into drugs and getting arrested for stealing stuff. Only she never went to jail. The court always sent her to a mental hospital. That's why, at Lyle House, I was so scared of being sent to one. I should have helped. You tried. It wouldn't have mattered. They'd already made up their minds. She went quiet for a moment. Mom tried to warn me. Sometimes she'd show up at my school, high on dope, going on about experiments and magic powers, and saying I had to hide before they found me. Another pause. I guess she wasn't so crazy after all, hey? No, she wasn't. She was trying to protect you. She nodded. Okay, enough of that. You need to rest up so you can find the guys. Nana always said I was good at helping people fall asleep. Better than any pills. You know why? Why? She grinned. 'Cause I can talk your ear off. Now, let's see, what can I talk about that'll bore you to sleep? Oh, I know. Guys. Hot guys. I have this list, see? The 10 hottest guys ever. Actually, it's 2 lists, 10 each, 'cause I needed one for real guys I actually know and one make-believe list, for guys in movies and bands. Not that they aren't real guys, because of course they're real. I finally drifted off and didn't wake until the roar of a truck sent me jerking up, limbs flailing. Light streamed through the windows. I checked my watch. 8:30. No sign of Liz. Was she on patrol? Or had she left already? Tori was still sound asleep, snoring softly. I shook her shoulder. It's morning. We need to search for the note. Tori opened her eyes, muttered that there probably wasn't any note, the guys were long gone, and we were screwed. A ray of sunshine, our Victoria. But after moaning about not having lifted breath mints or a hairbrush or breakfast, she did rise and help me. We'd been searching for about a half hour when Tori said, loud enough to be heard by anyone walking past the windows, the taggers in this town really have too much time on their hands. I hurried over to shush her. Taggers. She waved at the surrounding stacks of crates and I saw what she meant. A crate in every stack had been tagged with graffiti. My dad's store gets hit every month, but he never had one this fancy. She pointed to one almost hidden in shadow. Where the others were typical tags, nicknames and symbols, this was a sketch in black marker of a teenage guy with a paw print tattoo on his cheek, brandishing Wolverine-like claws. I grinned. Simon. When Tori gave me a hug. Look, I said, it's Simon. No. It's a guy with a paw on his face. It's Simon's work. This is one of his comic book characters. I knew that. Help me lift the crate. She didn't move. Why? Because the note I heaved the top crate off by myself will be under it. Why would he put? Sure enough, under the crate was a folded piece of paper. We both grabbed for it. I won. Simon had drawn 3 pictures. In the top left corner, like a salutation, was a ghost. The middle had a big sketch of Arnold Schwarzenegger as the Terminator. The third, in place of a signature, was a lightning bolt surrounded by fog. Beside the drawing, someone had scrawled in inch-high letters 10 a.m. Tori snatched it from me and turned it over. So where's the message? Right there. I pointed from picture to picture. It says, Chloe, I'll be back, Simon. Okay, that's just weird. And what's that mean? She pointed to the time. That would be Derek, making sure I know when they'll be back. Only once a day. Every time they sneak in here, it's a big risk. Anyway, the time isn't really important. If I pick up the message, Derek will smell me. He can follow my trail. Her nose wrinkled. Like a dog. Cool, hey. No. She made a face. So they weren't kidding about him being a werewolf. Explains a lot, don't you think? I shrugged and checked my watch. We've got just over an hour to wait, so I swore under my breath, making Tori arch her brows in mock surprise. We can't let the guys come back, I said, not with that Edison Group guard patrolling. There wasn't an Edison Group guard patrolling. There were 2. I sent Liz to check all possible entry points. She returned, naming 4, the main gate, the front delivery gate, the back delivery gate, and the entire surrounding fence. I doubted Derek would climb the fence again. He'd be exposed up there where anyone could see him. If I were him, I'd pick the same entry point as the Edison Group had yesterday, that rear gate. But I also knew Derek well enough to admit that I didn't know him well enough to guess his strategy with any real confidence. So we had to split up and cover all 3 entrances. I needed to stay close to Liz, so she could communicate with me. That meant Tori got the back. I could only pray she'd actually remember to watch. By 9:30 we were in position. The factory yard was at the edge of a residential area, a neighborhood of older homes including, a block away, Lyle House. Derek and I had come this way Saturday night when we escaped, and I still remembered the general layout. The roads ran north-south, with the factory yard down at the southern end. My spot was across the street from the factory, behind one of the end houses. No one was home, the driveway was empty and the windows dark. I crouched behind a shed watching the front delivery gate, ready to whistle at the first sign of the guys. At 9:45 an SUV passed in front of the factory, moving at a crawl. It was the same Edison Group vehicle Derek and I had run from on Saturday night. As it rolled past, I saw Mike in the driver's seat. Beside him sat Tori's mom, watching out the side window. The SUV continued to the corner, then made a right, heading for the back of the factory yard. I waited until it was out of sight, then leaped up. As I moved, a shadow loomed over me. My fists flew up, but before I could turn, hands grabbed me, one clamping over my mouth, the other around my waist, yanking me back behind the shed. "It's me," a deep voice rumbled. The hands released me and I turned. There stood Derek, all 6 foot something of him. Maybe it was just the thrill of seeing him, but he looked better than I remembered. His black hair was still lank, and his face was still dotted with acne. But he looked better. "I am so glad to see you," I said, grinning up at him. His snort said the feeling wasn't necessarily mutual. Maybe I should have been a little disappointed, but I was too relieved to care. At this moment, Derek's trademark scowl was better than any smile. "I am so glad." "Got that," he said. "Stop bouncing, Chloe, before they notice you. They're gone." That's why I looked behind him and my grin faded. "Where's Simon?" He's okay, isn't he?" I fumbled to pull out the insulin pouch. "I know he needs this." It was. That's his backup. He had another one in his pocket. "Oh. Right. Good. So where?" "Around back." I smelled Tori, so I thought it was a trap and... Tori. Her mom, the car, we have to warn her. "What?" I wheeled, motioning for him to follow. I crossed the yard, darting from hiding place to hiding place as I headed for the road the SUV had taken. Derek tried to keep up, his harsh whispers of "Chloe, get back here," mingled with harsher curses when I slid into spots he couldn't fit. Finally, as I dashed along a row of hedges, he caught me by the jacket collar and swung me off my feet, letting me dangle there like a puppy. "I know a better route. I've been here for 2 days, checking things out as I waited for you." He plunked me down but kept his grip on my collar so I couldn't take off. "Now what's this about Tori and her mom?" "No time. Just Liz. We need Liz. Liz is alive." I hesitated, reminding myself how much he'd missed. "No. I mean, her ghost. I was right about her being dead. She's been helping me, though, and we need her to scout the way." I broke from his grip and dashed to a break in the hedge. I slid sideways into it and peeked out. Liz stood in the middle of the road 2 blocks down. I gave a whistle that I thought was just fine, but Derek sighed, put his fingers in his mouth, and whistled loud enough to make my ears ring. I couldn't tell whether it got Liz's attention. He made me duck while he listened, in case it got anyone else's attention. After a moment, he let me peek around the hedge. "She's coming," I said. Derek nodded. He scanned the yards around us, making sure all was clear. "You wanted to lead," I said. "So lead. She'll catch up." He didn't move. When I tried to walk away, he caught my sleeve. "I gotta know what I'm walking into." 2 Edison Group guards discreetly patrolling the yard. Edison Group. And Tori's mom, plus the guy who shot at you Saturday night. But of all of them, Tori's mom is the one to watch. Tori's mom? Edison Group? What's... Derek? What? I looked up, meeting his gaze. "Do you trust me?" I honestly had no idea what the answer would be, but he didn't hesitate, just grunted, "Course." Then, "Yes, I know you want details. But we don't have time. Not if Simon's back there and Tori's mom's on her way. She's a witch, and she's not afraid to use her spells." "Good enough." He looked off across the yard. Maybe he did trust me, but for Derek, not having all the facts was like sticking a blindfold on him and telling him to follow. "Stay behind me," he said, and we took off. 17. Ella scouted the way, running ahead and whistling us onward. Derek's mouth stayed set in that way that let me know he wasn't happy, which was pretty much his normal expression, so I ignored it. The SUV had gone down a service road beside the factory. Along it were smaller industrial buildings, with more at the back, which is where we'd entered with the Edison group yesterday and where Tori now waited. It was also where the SUV had headed. We were still in the residential blocks to the north of the factory yard, now standing behind a minivan at the neighborhood's edge. As we peered around it, we could see the SUV parked behind another vehicle. Tori's mom, Mike, and the balding driver stood beside it, talking. "Where's Simon?" I whispered. "On the other side of them." "Tori." "I left her over there," I pointed. "She went around back to watch the rear entrance. Hopefully, she's lying low and staying put." "If it was you, yet." "Tori." A derisive snort. I'd have basked more in the compliment if I didn't know Derek considered Tori only slightly smarter than Plankton. "We can slip across this road and cut through the next yard," I said. "Then we can circle." Derek caught my arm again as I started to move at this rate. It was soon going to be as sore as my injured one. "Dog," he said, jerking his chin toward the fenced yard. It was inside earlier. Expecting to see a Doberman slavering at the fence, I followed his gaze to a little puff of white fur, the kind of dog women stick in their purses. It wasn't even barking, just staring at us, dancing in place. "Oh, my God! It's a killer Pomeranian." I glanced up at Derek. "It's a tough call, but I think you can take him." A glare. "That's not." The wind changed and the dog went rigid. Derek swore, and pulled me backward. The dog gave one low, piercing whine. Then it went nuts, jumping and twisting and barking, a whirlwind of white fur battering itself against the fence. Derek yanked me behind the minivan. We were out of the dog's sight, but it continued yelping and snarling, the wire fence twanging with each hit. "It smelled me," Derek said. "The werewolf thing. Do they always do that?" He shook his head. "I used to just make them nervous. They'd steer clear, maybe bark a bit. Now." He waved toward the racket. "I get this. We need to shut it up." "I'll wait." "Liz." She was already running over. "Could you distract that dog?" I asked her. "I think he wants to play fetch." Her brow furrowed. Then she smiled. "Right. I can do that." "Play fetch?" Derek whispered as she took off. "What?" I motioned him to the end of the van and pointed. There, on the other side of the fence, a stick levitated, then shook. Liz was holding it, but Derek could see only the stick. The dog watched it fly, then spun back to the fence, barking and jumping again. Liz retrieved the stick, and tapped it on the dog's back. Once she had his attention, she threw it. This time, he chased. I looked up at Derek, who was staring at the dog. Remember Liz thought she had a poltergeist? Turned out she is the poltergeist. She's a half-demon with the power of telekinesis. "Hey!" He turned to stare again, slowly shaking his head, as if wondering why he hadn't figured that out. Probably because he didn't know half-demons could be telekinetic, but for Derek, that wouldn't be an excuse. "Coast is clear!" Liz shouted. "And this pooch is getting bored." Derek and I got across the street. We headed for the service road on the other side, leading through the industrial buildings bordering the factory. Then Derek stopped. "Tori," he said. I peered past him. "Where?" "I don't see," I noticed his face lifted to the breeze. "Not see, smell, right." He nodded and led me to where she was huddled behind a wall, peeking around the other side. "It's us," I whispered. She saw Derek and without so much as a hello, leaned to look behind him. "Where's Simon?" "He's Is he okay? Why isn't he here? She glared up at Derek. Where'd you leave him? Passed out in an alley. Derek frowned in thought. Not sure where, though. He's kidding, I said as Tori sputtered. We need to get moving. Derek hooked a thumb at Tori while looking at me. She's your responsibility. Excuse me. Tori said. Derek didn't even glance her way. Make sure she keeps up. And shuts up. As we headed out, Liz returned to say the Edison group was in the factory yard, having slipped in the rear way again. We found the spot where Derek had left Simon, behind a building with faded for sale signs on the boarded-up windows. Well, where is he? Tori demanded. Hey! Must have broken his chain. He means Simon's a big boy and he's free to move around. I turned to Derek. Can you track him? Yet. He dropped to a crouch. It was a long way from stooping to sniff the ground, but Tori still stared. Please tell me he isn't doing what I think he's doing, she said. Derek scowled not at Tori but at me. There'd better be a good explanation for this, he said with a pointed look her way. Not really, I murmured. He took a deep breath and pushed to his feet. Stay here. Tori waited until he was gone, then shuddered. Okay, Derek always weirded me out, but that Wolfman stuff is seriously creepy. Suits him, I suppose. A creepy power for a creepy guy. I thought he looked better. She stared at me. What? He does. Probably because he's starting his wolf changes and he's not stressed out about being in Lyle House. That must help. You know what would really help? Shampoo. Deodorant. I raised my hand to cut her off. He smelled fine, so don't start that. I'm sure he's wearing deodorant and for once it's working. As for showers, they're a little hard to come by on the street, and we won't look much better soon. I'm just saying. Do you think he doesn't know what you're saying? Newsflash, he's not stupid. Derek was all too aware of the impression he made. At Lyle House, he'd showered twice a day, and it still hadn't fixed the puberty smackdown. She went back to watching for Simon. I stayed where I was, 10 feet away, better hidden, while keeping an eye on her and on that corner, waiting for. A soft poke at my shoulder blade startled me. Still jumpy, I see. I spun to see Simon, Derek hanging back behind him. Simon grinned, the sight as familiar as Derek's scowl. Got my note, I hear, he said. I pulled it out and waved it. He plucked it from my fingers and tucked it into my jacket pocket. Then he caught my hand, his thumb rubbing my knuckles, and the back of my throat ached with the relief of seeing him, finally actually seeing both of them after all the worry and the nightmares. If I'd had the courage, I would have hugged him. Instead, I just said, I'm really glad you found us, my voice cracking. Simon squeezed my hand. His lips lowering to my ear, whispering, I. He went rigid, head lifting. Hey, Simon, Tori said behind me. What is she doing here? Derek jabbed his thumb at me. Ask her. I'm not getting any answers. It's a long story, I said. Then it'll have to wait, Derek said. We need to get away from here. Simon whispered to me, but is everything okay? No, Tori said. I kidnapped her and forced her to escape with me. I've been using her as a human shield against those guys with guns, and I was just about to strangle her and leave her body here to throw them off my trail. But then you showed up and foiled my evil plans. Lucky for you, though. You get to rescue poor little Chloe again and win her undying gratitude. Undying gratitude. Simon looked at me. Cool. Does that come with eternal servitude? If so, I like my eggs sunny side up. I smiled. I'll remember that. Enough yapping, Derek said. Move out. 18. In the movie version of our flight, we'd have run straight into a trap. Everyone would have been taken captive, except me, being the heroine. I'd be smart enough to avoid capture, so I could plot a daring rescue to free my friends. But it wouldn't be easy. Or quiet. Tori and Simon would blow up a city block with magic. Derek would throw a few trucks at our pursuers. I would recruit a platoon of zombies from a conveniently located cemetery. But as cool as all that would have looked on the big screen, I was really more in the mood for a quiet getaway. And that's exactly what we got. The Edison group never left the factory yard. We walked at least 3 miles. When we were far enough from the factory to stop skulking, Derek led us into the commercial section on the other side of the neighborhood, where 4 teens wouldn't look so out of place on a school day. I know you guys love this cloak and dagger stuff, Tori said finally, but can't we just grab a taxi? Derek shook his head. I cleared my throat. A cab would be risky, but if there's a shorter route to where we're going, my feet would really appreciate it. Derek stopped short. I smacked into his back not for the first time, since he insisted on walking in front of me. I'd been tripping on his heels and mumbling apologies the whole way. When I'd slow down to let him get farther ahead, he'd snap at me to keep up. We're almost there, Simon said. He was beside me sticking to the curbside, walking as close as Derek. While normally I wouldn't complain about Simon being so close, I had the weird sensation of being blocked in. As we started forward again, I tried dropping back with Tori, who lagged behind, but Simon put his fingers on my elbow and steered me back into place. Okay, I said. Something's up. What's with the walking blockade? They're protecting you, Tori said. Shielding you from the big bad world. Neither of the guys said a word. Whatever it was, they weren't telling me. Not yet. Our destination was some kind of unused industrial building in a neighborhood so run down that even the gangbangers and the homeless seemed to steer clear. Just as we were about to go inside, Liz called to me. She stood by the missing front door like she couldn't cross the threshold. I asked whether there was magic keeping her out, but she said no, she just needed to talk to me. So I waved Derek and Simon on, telling them I had to speak to Liz. She'd been quiet since I'd met up with the others, staying out of sight. Now she crouched on the dirt patch beside the building to tug up one purple and orange sock. You know, I really loved these socks, but another day of having to look at them, and I'm going barefoot for eternity. She tried to smile, but after a moment's struggle, gave up and straightened. I'm taking off now. You don't need me anymore. No, I mean, if you want to, sure, but... That came out wrong. She lifted her foot, adjusting the sock again. I should go. But I'll be back. I don't have your shirt. We'll need to set up a rendezvous point or something. She laughed, almost genuine now. No more rendezvous points. I'll find you. I always do. It just might be a while. I've got stuff to do. And you? She looked toward the building, and the wistfulness in her eyes stabbed through me. You've got stuff to do. You and the others. Liz, It's okay. You do your thing, and I'll catch up. I'll miss you. She reached out, and I swore I felt her fingers brush mine. You're sweet, Chloe. Don't worry about me. I'll be back. Then she disappeared. The others were waiting just inside the door. We picked our way through the debris, walking single file in the near dark behind Derek. As we moved, the hairs on my neck rose, and a dull throbbing started in the back of my skull. I slowed. Now it was Tori's turn to smack into me. "Come on, move," she said. "Oh, that's right. Chloe's afraid of the dark. Simon, you'd better hold her hand or knock it off." Simon pushed past Tori and came up beside me. "You okay? There's something here. I can feel it." "Ghosts?" "I don't think so. It's like what I felt in the crawl space at Lyle House." Derek swore. I turned to peer at him in the darkness. "What?" "There's a body." "What?" Simon said, with Tori echoing, shriller. "There's a dead body somewhere in here. I smelled it yesterday, after we'd settled in." "And you didn't bother telling me," Simon said. "It's a body. Long dead. Some homeless guy. It's a good place otherwise." "Otherwise?" "A pitch-black hideaway filled with trash, dead bodies, and rats. You know how to pick 'em, brother." "Are rats?" I said, thinking of the bats. "Great," Tori muttered. "She's scared of rats, too." "As long as I'm here, they're staying away," Derek said. "It wasn't the live rats I was worried about," he continued. "But I didn't think about the body." "Chloe? Is it a problem?" It was. I should say something about the bats, how I'd accidentally raised them while dealing with that ghost. But I looked at everyone, how tired they seemed, all impatiently waiting to find a place to rest and talk, find out what I knew. I could handle this. As long as I didn't try summoning Liz, I wouldn't raise this body. So that's what I said. "But it bothers you being near it," Simon said. "We should. I'm sure safe places aren't easy to find." I forced a smile. "It'll be good experience. I need to learn to recognize the feeling." "Oh, of course," Tori said. "Chloe's going to learn from it. Do you ever quit? You're like a perky little Energizer bunny." Simon turned to snap something at her, but Derek waved us on. We reached a room in the middle, with no windows. Derek turned on a lantern. It cast enough wavering light to see by. Earlier, the guys had set up crates to sit on, and laid newspaper over the filthy floor. 2 new backpacks were hidden behind the crates alongside a neat stack of cheap blankets. Not exactly the Hilton or even Lyle House, but a lot better than where we'd slept last night. As we sat, Derek pulled a handful of energy bars from his pocket, and gave one to me. "Oh, right. You must be starving." Simon reached into his pockets. "I can offer 1 bruised apple and 1 brown banana. Convenience stores aren't the place to buy fruit, as I keep telling someone. Better than these. For you, anyway, Simon." Derek passed a bar to Tori. "Because you aren't supposed to have those, are you?" I said. "Which reminds me, I took out the insulin." Derek said. "It's your backup. So my dark secret is out." I didn't know it was a secret. Not really. Just not something I advertise. In other words, if kids knew he had a chronic illness, they might treat him differently. He had it under control, so there was no reason for anyone to know about it. "Backup?" Tori said. "You mean he didn't need that?" "Apparently not," I murmured. Simon looked from her to me, confused, then understanding. "You guys thought that if you didn't get your medicine in the next 24 hours, you'd be dead?" I said. Not exactly, but close. You know, the old upping the ante with a fatal disease that needs medication twist. Apparently, it still works. Kind of a letdown, then, hey. No kidding. Here we were, expecting to find you minutes from death. Look at you, not even gasping. All right, then. Emergency medical situation, take 2. He leaped to his feet, staggered, keeled over, then lifted his head weakly. Chloe? Is that you? He coughed. Do you have my insulin? I placed it in his outstretched hand. You saved my life, he said. How can I ever repay you? Undying servitude sounds good. I like my eggs scrambled. He held up a piece of fruit. Would you settle for a bruised apple? I laughed. You guys are weird, Tori said. Simon sat on the crate beside me. That's right. We are totally weird and completely uncool. Your popularity is plummeting just by being near us. So why don't you? Chloe. Derek interrupted. How's your arm? Her. Simon swore under his breath. Way to keep showing me up. First, food. Now her arm. He turned to me. How is it? Fine. All stitched and bandaged. We should take a look, Derek said. Simon helped me pull off the jacket. Is that all you're wearing? Derek said. Where's your sweater? They didn't give us a chance to grab anything. I have money. I'll buy one. 2, Simon said. It's freezing after the sun goes down. You must have been a popsicle last night. I shrugged. I had other things on my mind. Her aunt and Ray, Tori said. We'll get to that, I said, as Simon looked at me. There's a lot to catch up on. You guys start. The rest of the audiobook will be continued in the next episode. Join us on Patreon for early access or more great audiobooks. A link is provided in the video description.